My son Andrew screamed at me, "You're not coming to my birthday without an apology." I just adjusted my scarf and calmly replied, "Fine." 3 days later, I closed all his accounts. Andrew, my only son, is 42 years old. Standing before me was a stranger with a face twisted by rage. His wife Monica looked at me triumphantly, as if she had won. The guests froze. Someone laughed awkwardly, and then my fingers, the edge of the white envelope I was clutching, crackled. Inside that envelope was something that would make my son go pale by the end of the week. I didn't scream. I didn't explain myself. I just looked at him and understood. Today I stopped being the convenient mother. Today I reclaimed my voice. Andrew thought he had put a period on our relationship, but in that very moment, I was actually starting a new chapter of my life. My dear friends, please write in the comments where you're watching from and how old you are. I know many of you have walked similar paths, felt similar heartbreak. Your stories matter too. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 74 years old. I spent my entire life working as a school librarian in small-town Colorado, surrounded by books and children's voices. After my husband John passed away 12 years ago, I moved to this quiet house outside Denver. Every morning starts the same way. I put the kettle on, slice apples for my homemade strudel, listening to the robins singing in my garden. That garden became my sanctuary after John died. I planted mint, roses, and tended to the old apple tree John planted when Andrew was 7 years old. I remember that day so clearly. Andrew's small hands helping his father dig the hole, both of them covered in dirt, laughing. "This tree will give us apples for decades, Maggie," John had said, his arm around our boy. If only he could see what became of that boy. At first glance, our neighborhood seems peaceful. Children's laughter echoes down the street. Grandchildren play in backyards. On the day of Andrew's birthday, colorful streamers were already hanging on their fence. The air smelled of coffee and freshly baked cake. Everything looked festive. Yet in all that joy, I always sensed something wrong. A crack running beneath the surface that nobody else could see. Andrew grew up to become a successful civil engineer, working for a major construction company building interstate highways. As a child, he was stubborn but kind-hearted. I was so proud when he graduated summa cum laude from Colorado State. I was proud when he bought his first house. I was proud when he married Monica, even though something in her eyes always made me uncomfortable. Now he has 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, James, who's 8, and Sarah, who's 12. Between Monica and me stands an invisible wall, built brick by brick over 7 years of marriage. Every interaction feels like walking through a minefield. The first crack appeared when I offered to help. Monica set the table during their housewarming party. She pressed her lips into a thin line and said coldly, "This is my house, Margaret. I'll handle it." That was her way of drawing boundaries, of reminding me that in this house, I was merely a guest. I fell silent, looking down at my hands where John's simple gold ring still gleamed after all these years. That's when I first felt truly unnecessary, like I'd been invited to a gathering but asked to wait outside. Initially, I dismissed these feelings. "Don't be oversensitive, Margaret," I told myself. "Young couples need their space. What matters is that Andrew is happy, that the grandchildren are healthy." But a mother's heart recognizes rejection, even when it comes wrapped in politeness. I loved bringing gifts to their house: homemade apple strudel, fresh vegetables from my garden, honey from the local farmer's market. Each offering was my way of sharing love, of maintaining connection, but my contributions were received with forced smiles and quickly hidden away. "The children really shouldn't have so much sugar," Monica would say, placing my carefully baked treats in containers that rarely saw the light of day again. The children would sometimes sneak pieces when their parents weren't looking, whispering Grandma's cake is the best. But even these small victories felt hollow when I saw Monica's disapproving glances. I kept coming back because this was my son's home, where my grandchildren lived, where my family was supposed to be. But each visit reinforced the same painful truth. I was no longer truly welcome in my own son's life. The humiliations started small. so subtle, I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. Coffee was always served to me last, after it had cooled and the cream had settled. Andrew got his coffee in the good china. Monica received hers with artistic foam designs, while mine came in a chipped mug, often placed precariously at the corner of the table, where it might easily be knocked over. My personal belongings, reading glasses, knitting projects, the small photo of John I always carried, were constantly relocated. "We're just tidying up," they'd say, but my things always ended up in obscure drawers or forgotten corners. When I brought children's books to read to James and Sarah at bedtime, they'd vanish by my next visit. "We prefer contemporary stories," Monica explained. "These old books aren't really appropriate for modern children." The requests for help began in a, "Margaret, could you just wipe up this spill? Would you mind taking the garbage out? Could you load the dishwasher while we finish up here?" Each request came with a smile, phrased as if they were doing me a favor by allowing me to be useful. "You're so good at domestic things," they'd say, making my servitude sound like a compliment. I told myself it was fine, that helping was what grandmothers do, but deep inside, something was slowly dying. My dignity, my sense of belonging, my identity, as anything more than an unpaid housekeeper. One afternoon, while I was weeding Monica's flower beds, another favor I'd been asked to perform, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone. "Oh, Andrew's mother, she's actually quite useful. Free babysitting, free cleaning, free cooking. It's like having domestic help that works for gratitude instead of wages." The laughter that followed cut through me like broken glass. I sat there among the petunias, dirt under my fingernails, my 74-year-old knees aching, and finally understood. I wasn't a grandmother to them. I wasn't Andrew's mother. I was free labor, a resource to be exploited until I was no longer useful. But it was little James who unknowingly delivered a cruel blow. One evening, playing with his toy cars, he announced, "Grandma, Mommy says you don't have enough to do at your house, so you like coming here to help us." When I gently tried to explain that I came to visit because I loved them, he looked puzzled. "But don't you get lonely with nothing to do?" Out of the mouths of babes comes devastating truth. My own family believed I had no life, no purpose, no value beyond my willingness to serve. Sarah was different, though sometimes I worried I was seeing what I wanted to see. She'd sneak over while I was washing dishes and whisper, "Grandma, will you tell me about when Daddy was little?" Those moments kept me going. Small flames of genuine connection in an increasingly cold house. The breaking point came on Andrew's 42nd birthday. I'd spent hours preparing not just his favorite apple strudel with cinnamon, but also a photo album I'd been working on for months. Pictures of Andrew as a baby, his first steps, school plays, graduation, his wedding day. I wanted to give him memories, a tangible piece of his history. Our shared past when love flowed freely between us. The house blazed with lights and decorations. Cars filled the driveway and lined the street. Andrew's colleagues, Monica's friends, neighbors, extended family. It looked like the social event of the year. I walked up the familiar pathway carrying my gifts, my heart full of hope that maybe, in the warmth of celebration, we could bridge the growing distance between us. James and Sarah ran to greet me, their faces bright with excitement. "Grandma's here," Sarah called out, grabbing my free hand. For a moment, it felt like old times, like I truly belonged. But then Monica appeared in the doorway, stunning in a red cocktail dress, wineglass in hand. Her smile was raised. "Oh, Margaret, how nice that you made it." Behind her emerged Andrew, my son, my boy who once brought me dandelions and called them sunshine flowers for the Sunshine Mom. He wore an expensive suit I'd never seen before, his face flushed with wine and attention from his guests. But when he looked at me, his expression darkened. Monica whispered something in his ear, her hand possessive on his arm. Andrew's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Monica and I have talked, and we think it's time you showed some respect for my wife in her own home." The music seemed to lower. Conversations gradually died down as people sensed tension. "I don't understand," I whispered, clutching my gifts tighter. "You criticize everything she does. You make passive-aggressive comments about her cooking, her parenting, her housekeeping. Either apologize to Monica right now, or I think it's better if you leave." The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything I'd ever said, every gentle suggestion, every moment of trying to help, it had all been twisted into attacks. I looked around at the faces watching us, some embarrassed, some curious, all witnessing my humiliation. Monica stood beside Andrew, her expression perfectly composed, but I caught a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. This was her moment of victory. Sarah pressed closer to me, sensing something terrible was happening. "Grandma," she whispered. I looked at my son. This man I'd raised alone after his father died. This person I'd sacrificed everything for, and I saw him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was a 42-year-old man who had chosen his wife's version of events over any consideration of his mother's feelings. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry or beg or defend myself. Instead, I carefully placed the photo album on the porch table and let the strudel box rest beside it. "I understand," I said quietly, my voice somehow steady. Then I turned and walked away from my son's house, knowing it would be the last time I entered as a welcome guest. The drive home passed in a blur of hurt and confusion. How had expressions of love been interpreted as criticism? When had my presence become such a burden? I sat alone in my kitchen that night, staring at the wall, wondering how I'd become so unwelcome in my own son's life. But something was stirring beneath the hurt, a growing awareness that maybe, just maybe, I'd been seeing this situation all wrong. Maybe I wasn't the problem here. 2 days later, Sarah appeared at my back door after school. She looked around nervously before slipping inside. "Grandma, I heard Mom and Dad talking about money stuff, about your house and your bank account. It sounded ... not right." She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack, a printout she'd found in the trash. It was an email exchange between Andrew and a financial advisor, discussing mother's assets and inheritance, planning and liquidation options. My hands shook as I read phrases like "when we gain access to her accounts and the Denver property should net us enough for the lake house down payment." They were counting my money as if it were already theirs, planning their future with assets I was still using to live. I looked at this brave 12-year-old who had risked her parents' anger to show me the truth. "Sarah, sweetie, this must stay between us, okay? But thank you for showing me. You may have just saved your old grandma from making a terrible mistake." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, making lists, checking bank statements, reviewing the financial power of attorney I had indeed signed 2 years earlier, but only for emergency medical decisions, not for asset management. Somehow, Andrew and Monica had misunderstood its scope, or perhaps they were hoping I wouldn't remember the exact terms. The next morning, I dressed in my best navy suit and drove to the bank where I'd done business for 37 years. Mrs. Henderson, the manager, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Thompson, wonderful to see you. How can I help today?" "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said calmly, starting with closing the joint account I share with my son. Mrs. Henderson looked surprised but remained professional. "Of course. May I ask the reason?" "I'm simplifying my financial affairs," I replied. It was true enough. The process took most of the day. Joint accounts had to be properly closed, new accounts established, beneficiaries updated. I also met with the bank's trust officer to discuss setting up an education fund for Sarah, not accessible until she turned 18, and only if she maintained good grades and stayed out of serious trouble. By late afternoon, Andrew's access to my money was completely severed. He could no longer see my balance, withdraw funds, or make financial decisions on my behalf. For the first time in 2 years, my money was truly mine again. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Whatever happened next, I was financially protected. Andrew called that evening, his voice tight with panic. "Mom, I got a call from the bank. They said our joint account was closed. What happened? I closed it, I replied calmly. It seemed like the right time to simplify my finances. But Mom, we use that account for emergencies. What if something happens to you? What if you need help managing your money? I'll manage just fine, Andrew. I've been handling my own finances since before you were born. This is crazy. You're being manipulated by someone who's been talking to you. The accusation stung, but I kept my voice level. The only person who's been talking to me is myself, and I've decided I want control over my own money. We'll see about that, he said, and hung up. I knew this was just the beginning. Over the next week, my phone rang constantly. Andrew called multiple times daily, his tone alternating between anger and false concern. Monica sent text messages about my mental state and suggested I needed professional evaluation. Even my sister from Phoenix called, clearly prompted by Andrew, expressing worry about my sudden, erratic behavior. But I held firm. Every conversation, every guilt trip, every veiled threat only reinforced my decision. I was 74 years old, in full possession of my faculties, and I had every right to control my own money. The breakthrough came when Andrew showed up at my door unannounced. Monica and the children in tow. James and Sarah hung back uncertainly while their parents approached with determined expressions. Mom, we need to talk, Andrew said, pushing past me into my living room. This has gone far enough. What exactly has gone far enough? I asked. Monica spoke up, her voice honeyed but firm. Margaret, we know you're upset about the birthday party. Andrew was stressed. He drank too much. He said things he shouldn't have. But closing our accounts, that's not how family handles disagreements. Our accounts, I repeated. They were my accounts that I graciously shared with my son. There's a difference. Andrew ran his hands through his hair. A gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was frustrated. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. We had plans. The lake house, the kids' college funds, upgrades to our current house. We've made commitments based on our understanding of the family's financial situation. You made commitments based on money that wasn't yours, I said quietly. It would have been ours eventually. Monica burst out, then caught herself. I mean, we assumed ... You assumed I'd die conveniently soon and leave everything to you. Instead, I'm very much alive and planning to spend my own money on my own life. The room fell, silent except for the ticking of my mantel clock. Sarah was watching the adults with wide, worried eyes. Andrew's voice became pleading. Mom, please, we're family. We take care of each other. You took care of me when I was young. Now, it's my turn to look out for you. Don't you trust me? The question hung in the air. Did I trust him? I looked at my son, successful, handsome, charming when he wanted to be, but underneath the polished exterior, I saw something that broke my heart. Entitlement. He genuinely believed my money was his birthright. My independence was selfishness. My autonomy was a problem to be solved. I trust you to be exactly who you've shown me you are, I said finally. Someone who sees his mother as a financial resource rather than a person deserving respect. They left angry, but they left. And for the first time in months, my house felt peaceful. 3 weeks later, I made another major decision. I put my house on the market. The call from Andrew came within hours of the for sale sign going up. You can't sell the house, he shouted. That's our family home. That's where I grew up. It's my house, Andrew. I can sell it whenever I choose. But where will you live? What's your plan? This is insane. I had been dreading this conversation, but I found myself surprisingly calm. I'm moving to a senior community in Boulder, independent living, but with support services available if I need them. I'll have my own apartment, my own life, and I won't be a burden to anyone. You're not a burden, he protested, but the words rang hollow after months of being treated like one. I'm happy, Andrew. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. I hope someday you can understand that. But understanding required acknowledging that he'd been wrong, and Andrew wasn't ready for that level of Sarah visited me one last time before I moved. We packed my books together, wrapped my dishes in newspaper, folded John's old sweaters that still smelled faintly of his cologne. "I'm going to miss this house," she said, running her fingers along the kitchen counter where I'd taught her to roll pie crust. "Houses are just buildings, sweetheart. Home is wherever people love you for who you are, not what you can give them." She hugged me tight. "Will I still see you?" "As often as your parents allow," I promised. "And when you turn 18, you'll be free to make your own choices about relationships." On moving day, Andrew didn't come to help. Monica didn't say goodbye, but Sarah was there, tears streaming down her face as the moving truck pulled away from the only home she'd known me to have. My new apartment in Boulder was smaller but bright, with a mountain view and a balcony where I could grow herbs. For the first time in years, every stick of furniture, every book, every photograph was exactly where I wanted it to be. The senior community was nothing like the stereotypical old folks' home. My neighbors were retired professors, former business owners, teachers, artists, people with rich lives and interesting stories. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and discovered I had a talent for watercolor painting. Most surprisingly, I began dating Harold Peterson, a retired history teacher whose wife had died 3 years earlier. Asked me to dinner one evening after our book club meeting. I hadn't been on a date in over 50 years, but Harold was kind, intelligent, and made me laugh. We started spending time together, walks in the mountains, visits to museums, quiet dinners where we talked about books and travel and dreams we'd never thought we'd pursue again. For my 75th birthday, Harold threw me a small party. My new friends sang happy birthday over homemade cake, and I received thoughtful gifts, books, art supplies, a beautiful scarf. It was everything Andrew's birthday party hadn't been: genuine, warm, and focused on celebrating me rather than tolerating me. Sarah managed to visit twice that year, taking the bus from Denver during school breaks. Each time, she seemed more mature, more aware of the dynamics in her own family. She met Harold and my new friends, and I could see her processing the fact that her grandmother had a full, rich life beyond what her parents had portrayed. "You seem really happy, Grandma," she said during her summer visit. "I am, sweetheart, happier than I've been in years. Mom says you're being stubborn and selfish." I considered how to respond. "Sarah, sometimes what looks like selfishness to other people is really just self. I spent so many years trying to earn love by giving everything I had. I finally learned that love can't be bought. And people who try to make you buy it don't really love you anyway." She nodded thoughtfully. This wise child was already learning lessons it had taken me decades to understand. Andrew's attempts to reconcile came sporadically over the following months, usually coinciding with financial stress. A text message about missing me, a voicemail on holidays, a card on Mother's Day with a generic message about family being important. But reconciliation requires acknowledgement of harm caused, willingness to change, and genuine respect for boundaries. Andrew offered none of these. He wanted me back on his terms, grateful, generous, and compliant. I responded to his overtures politely but briefly. "Thank you for thinking of me. Hope you and the family are well. Take care of yourself." I left the door open for genuine relationship while refusing to step back into the role of family. ATM. The most heartbreaking moments came when I heard updates about my grandchildren through mutual acquaintances. James was struggling in school. Sarah was becoming withdrawn and anxious. Monica and Andrew's marriage was showing strain. Part of me wanted to rush in, offer help, try to fix everything, but I'd learned that my help wasn't wanted unless it came without conditions or expectations of respect. They wanted my resources, not my wisdom, my money, not my presence, my compliance, not my voice. I channeled that grandmother energy into volunteering at the local elementary school, reading to children who lit up when I arrived with new books. These children appreciated me for what I offered freely, without resentment or obligation. On a crisp October afternoon, nearly 2 years after I'd moved to Boulder, Sarah appeared at my door. She was 14 now, taller, more confident, but with worry lines around her eyes that no child should carry. "Grandma, I took the bus by myself. I told Mom I was going to the library. I pulled her inside, made her favorite hot chocolate, and waited for her to explain. Dad lost his job, she said finally. The construction company laid off a bunch of people. Mom's working extra shifts at the hospital. But it's not enough. They're fighting all the time about money. My first instinct was to offer help, to solve their problems with my checkbook. But I forced myself to remain silent. They keep talking about you, Sarah continued, about how you abandoned the family when we needed you most, about how selfish you are for keeping all that money when your own son is struggling. The words stung, but they weren't unexpected. What do you think, Sarah? She looked up at me with those wise eyes. I think they made their choice when they decided you were only valuable for what you could give them. And now they're mad that you chose yourself instead. Out of the mouths of babes, I saved some money from babysitting, she said, reaching into her backpack. It's only $47, but I want to contribute something to the family instead of just taking. I stared at this generous, the thoughtful child who was trying to solve adult problems with her babysitting money. In that moment, I understood the difference between love and manipulation, between family and transaction. Sarah, that money is yours. You earned it, and you should keep it. But I want to tell you something important. I took her hands in mine. Real family doesn't require you to give up pieces of yourself to prove your worth. Real love doesn't come with a price tag. Your parents are struggling, and that's hard. But their struggles don't obligate you to fix them. She started crying, then quiet tears of a child who'd been carrying adult burdens for too long. I miss you, she whispered. I miss having someone in the family who isn't angry all the time. I held her while she cried, this brave girl who was learning lessons about family dynamics that would serve her well in adulthood. Even though the learning was painful now, before she left, I gave her a sealed envelope. This is for when you graduate high school, I told her. Don't open it before then, and don't tell your parents about it. It's between you and me. Inside was information about the education trust I'd established, along with a letter explaining why I'd made the choices I had. By the time she graduated, she'd be mature enough to understand that sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when those boundaries cause temporary pain. My dear friends, I'm sharing this story because I know many of you have walked similar paths. Maybe you're walking one now. Maybe you're the parent feeling entitled to your child's resources. Maybe you're the adult child struggling with elderly parents. Maybe you're the grandparent caught in the middle. Here's what I've learned. Family relationships built on financial dependency aren't relationships, they're business arrangements. Love that requires payment isn't love, it's transaction. And respect that must be bought will disappear the moment you stop paying. I'm 75 years old now, and I'm genuinely happy. I have Harold's companionship, new friendships, hobbies that bring me joy, and a life that's entirely my own. I have Sarah's authentic love, not because I provide for her, but because she knows I value her as a person. Most importantly, I have my self-respect back. I sleep peacefully knowing that I'm not being used. I wake up grateful for each day I get to live on my own terms. I've learned that it's never too late to choose dignity over convenience, self-respect over family approval. Andrew sends occasional messages, usually when he's facing financial difficulties. They follow a predictable pattern: brief contact, vague reference to missing me, subtle hint about current struggles, implied request for assistance. I respond kindly but briefly, offering emotional support but not financial rescue. Some bridges, once burned, can never be fully rebuilt, but I'm not bitter. Bitterness would be just another prison, and I've already served my sentence in the prison of other people's expectations. To my viewers who are struggling with difficult family dynamics, remember this: you can love people and still protect yourself from their dysfunction. You can wish people well while refusing to fund their choices. You can be family without being a victim. And to those who might see themselves in Andrew and Monica's behavior, it's never too late to examine your motivations in relationships. Are you loving people or using them? Are you offering respect or demanding compliance? Are you building relationships or managing assets? My story isn't about money, really. It's about the fundamental human need for dignity, respect, and and authentic love. Those things can't be bought or sold. They can only be freely given and received. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there find the courage to choose themselves, to set boundaries, to demand the respect they deserve. Your stories matter too. Share them in the comments. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone, that it's never too late to reclaim their voice. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 75 years old, and I'm finally, truly free.